Okay, this is my workbench. This is how I'm set up. I have my water dish right there, mallet, all my tools. These are my favorites right there, and I use those the most, so I keep them close. And then I have my patterns. This is the expanded pattern that I had for the front rainbow, and this is the pattern for the back that I have. So I'll show you how I do the swirl marks and all of that. I'm going to case this leather. That is cased. It's been a couple minutes. All ready to lay this out. Now remember, this is the top up here, and this is the top because it's going to be folded like this. So the inside flap, I've got to remember that's the top. So remember my little tick marks that I have here and here. You can barely see them. I can barely see them. You probably can't see them at all. I line those up for where I want this to be. And this is still a little damp. This isn't carving. This is not ready for carving, but I can put my design on there, and then by the time I get that on there, it'll probably be ready. So all I do is I take my stylus and I'm going to trace this. I hold on with one hand and I trace with the other, and make sure that that doesn't move. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because you know, when I'm gonna start carving it, I can adjust it a little bit. You don't want to have marks going everywhere, but let me get this on here real quick. And this is a pretty simple design. I don't, you know, I have a lot more complex design that I'm going to be demonstrating when I make a handbag for, it's going to be for the Pendleton competition for the handbags. That one's I'm doing concurrently, but I'm not going to publish that one until after the competition. So that has a entirely new design that is very complex. And I will show you a lot more techniques with that video. So you'll have to wait till November for that one. But also, I got my hand on here pretty heavy. So you can lift it, lift the paper, but you don't want to, you know, you don't want this moving around. So you can lift it, see if you got all the right marks. And I think I've got them all on there. Okay. So if you notice, oops, I didn't. Okay. So, oops. See this line right here? All right. Now this is easy. It's going to go from here to there, and I know it's pretty round, so I can go in there and correct that without having to realign that. Don't be afraid to do that. You know, this is your design. You can redo that. All right, now the front of it, I'm going to also align this up like that. Okay, and now that's, actually this is the back. This is the front, right? And then the flap is the other front. So I'm going to trace this out. You might not be able to see the whole thing on camera, but I will show you once I get this all on here. In this design, I will be doing bubbles and swirls, so I will show you how to do that free hand. I don't have to put that on here before, because it is pretty freeform. Some designs that I do pre-draw them. But the cool thing about doing it when it's on the leather is then you know that you'll never repeat it exactly. So I like to do that so that they're all one of a kind. And then you can tell your client that all of your stuff is one of a kind. And that actually adds value to your stuff. There's that belly again. All right, so those are both on there. Okay. I think I'm going to have this guy going for a fly, and I'm going to do some watermarks. So let me show you how I do the watermark. Now this fish, I want to make him have splashes. I'm not going to worry about the bubbles yet, but I do want him to have splashes because we're doing a tail flip. So I'm going to do those freeform. So I do little raindrops that have multiple kind of things going on like that. And you can make them go either way. This is a design that I do a lot of, so I'm pretty happy with the way it goes on freeform. And you think about how that water is going to be splashing off his tail, and then this makes it very cool. And now I can get the water motion going, and it'll go around this. Okay. Thinking of, I have this groove line that I will put on also, so that I don't put the pattern on the outside of the edge there. Okay, so we'll do that next. This I'm pretty happy with. Let's do a little bit here, make it kind of matching style. Little raindrops keep falling on my head. Do you sing in your studio? I usually have my my Alexa on. I really like Zac Brown Band and Jimmy Buffett and old 80s rock. Okay, so I'm happy with those little bubbles. And then what I'm going to do is, to kind of keep in my same style, I'm going to do a little bit of water movement, okay? So this is my new style that I developed last year, and it's very popular. I can put in some staining. Oh, I did want to do the stitch groove. So I have this regular groove, about 1/4 inch. So I'm going to put that on now. And that will keep me from going outside the lines. So that's all put in there. So now even like I have it flipped up the other way. So same thing, I'm going to just put in some kind of, this kind of reminds me of the 60s and all the psychedelic kind of cool groovy stuff that they used to make. And it's free form, and you can tell it doesn't take much effort to do it, and you can start and stop it by making points on it like I just did. And that way we've got a little bit of a water feature, and then it'll even indicate more movement with the fish, which is pretty cool. Now you see what I do too. This is not the same width. I vary my widths, and it seems more natural when you do that. I want to put I think a little swirl here. I will put this on the stone now, and we'll get ready to carve it. First thing I'm going to do before I start using my swivel knife is strop it. So I got my chalk here. I'm going to put some chalk on there, and then you strop it so it stays nice and sharp. If I have this dulled down, then a lot of times I will I have a sharpening stone that I can do right on the fly. So I don't keep my knives super sharp, because then you might go through the leather. So that's all ready to go. So I'm just gonna start, and usually I start from one side and work over, and I'll probably do the bubble stuff last. This is pretty sharp, so I just start going, and you notice that this isn't perfect right here, but I don't care because I'm carving it, and it's artwork. It's not exact science, and I like that about it. And I think that it'll show in the end piece. You keep your knife pretty vertical, and I'll just start going on this. Now, even though that was a straight line, I can put some wave in it like that. Comfortable with it? You might go slower. I tend to be fast at everything I do, especially paint. And they say that I'm the fastest painter in the West. Notice I have a Execuglide chair. It makes it really convenient when you're changing angles, so you don't have to, you know, turn your leather. I can turn my whole body. Okay, so I'll just keep cutting this, and then we'll get to my next step. As you can see, I've got that initial cut done. It was getting really dry, so I re-wet just this section, and I'll go all the way to the edge. That'll give me about enough time to probably carve this if I was worried about it, because this is a big surface, but these fish have minimal amounts of detail in them. Most of the detail is in the paint. I will start doing my beveling. So this is just a little wet still. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bevel all along this outside. I'm going to make sure the outside line, which side of the bevel I'm going to be, so that I know which side is going to raise up. If I want it raised, then I put it on the outside, right? So I'm going to start doing that when it's ready. It's about ready. I'm just going to go for it. So you lay that beveler in that cut, and then I walk it. You can go back and forth a little bit. Like that. So I'm just going to keep going. I know a lot of people bevel after they put the detail in, but I like my detail to be really sharp. So it's a little bit different style. I switch styles up when I do different things, like florals are different than fish. Got a lot more detail in them. So I might use a different order. I'm just going to keep going. As you can see, I'm just continuing. Put a little bit of detail in the gills and everything with this. Remember, you got to rock your tool so that you can get in those corners. And I find that this takes, you know, if I wasn't exact on a line, this will cover up that little mistake. Okay, and you always want to have your beveler on the top of the line. So once I get all the tops of these lines, if I have to go around here, then I'm going to flip it. So I go all the way around the things that I think should be beveled one way, and then I'll flip the surface and bevel it again. Also, when you're doing connections like here, you want to rock your heel into there, and I'll bevel all those too. So I'm just going to keep going. Now you see This whole part has been beveled. Okay, I left this alone. This is dry. I'm not going to touch this, bevel this. We'll re-wet this in a minute. So what I'm going to do is show you how I detail one of these fish. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a fly up here later. So I'm going to start with his eyeball. And this used to be a hole punch. Now I wore it out, so now I use it for eyeballs. Makes perfect eyeball. And then I will take my spoon, and I wanna see where my center line is on this fish, because I like to put heavier scales on the top and lighter on the bottom. And it's just really a textural thing, because trout, you really can't feel the scales very much. So what I'm going to do is, see the center of that tail? I'm just going to make a spoon mark up and go to the center of this fish, just like that. So you barely see it. That's my guide, okay? And that's what I'm going to use for the fish scale. I can also go with a spoon and smooth out some of these areas if I feel like we're on the watermarks, okay? I'm not too concerned with it. And then the next thing I'm going to do, I'm not going to put the scale in first. I'm going to put in my fin marks. So as this dries, each tool can be used sparingly to make a mark. Now, the bevel is nice because I do it early, because it seems to be okay when it's wetter. But as it dries, you'll notice that some tools are better for drier, especially like my mule's foot. So right now, I'm gonna put the blades in with the swivel knife, and usually I do this pretty quick because I've done it so many times. Some artists would be counting these, but I find that when this is painted, you're not going to be counting blades. You're going to be looking at polka spots and movement and color and all of that. I always start from the center on my tail, and you'll see why. So this is the center of my tail, and this is the center of my tail. And I'll do like a kind of a C. See how that's concave on that one side? And then I'll do the same thing on this side in a different direction. That way, you know, even if I didn't do anything else, that looks like a tail already. And remember, you're going to have smaller here, and then it fans out. So you're going to have to think about moving this line a little bit wider on the edge every time, okay? You notice I'm doing kind of an S-curve in there, too, because these are dynamic. There, I'm very happy with that. Okay. And I also use a stylus on these splashes. And this is just kind of a freeform thing that I do, but I just kind of do this with it so that it's a little rounder in areas. And it looks nice when it's stained. Just a kind of a stylized thing that I do. Pretty quick. And that's so they're not flat, you know. I could worry about it being raindrops and mold it more, but you know, when this is on a flat surface, you know, I can highlight it with the paint. It looks good. Same thing with these fins. Let me just do a little dimension there. And you can play with the modeling and really detail this up. If it was smaller, if I was more worried about if I wanted it to, not be painted, I'd worry about this more. But because I lose so much texture in the paint, that's why I don't have to be as detail oriented in that. I'm more detail oriented in the highlights and such. So you notice this is overlapping, so I can even think about shadows and stuff with that. Alright, let me show you how I do the mule's foot. And because this steel head is big, he's going to have small scale on him. If I was doing a, like this is a close-up of a rainbow, I might put a bigger mule's foot on there. So, and you got to think about which direction these scales are, and so that it's going to lay down flat. And there is smaller scale here, and then it goes heavier through here. So I'm just going to start. Oops, I didn't put his nostril in. That will bother me after a while. I'm just going to put where his nostril would be. And I'll just start small. And I'm barely tapping. And you notice I'm not putting a pattern in. Now, if I was doing a bonefish or tarpon or something that had a really remarkable pattern in it, then I would lay that out. But what I'm doing is just texture. So these little scales are maybe where the light's bouncing off. There's shadow in certain areas. And I'm not making a pattern. I'm just kind of equally spacing it out. And I'm not laying the whole mule's foot down. Because if you put that whole thing down there, it will look like a huge, like, blade of grass or something. I'm just doing the toe of the tool so that it's just a hint. Because remember, once this is stained and painted, I just want a hint of texture in there. And you also have to think about direction. Once I get down to the tail, these little V's are going to start pointing in a different direction. Right now I'm pointing towards the back of the tail. But when I turn around that corner, you got to really make it go around the corner also. And you notice I am not putting them down here yet, because this is the underside of my fish and they're even smoother on the bottom. So I'm just doing the top scales right now. This is where you start having to take the turn. So this is going this way now. So if you have to turn your fish so that you stay straight. But you got to point towards the tail. And I noticed that there's always like a more of a gathering of texture right at the back of the tail. I do a lot more little scales over there. Okay, so that's the top of the fish. Now I'm just going to do about half as many scales on the bottom of the fish, and even lighter on the texture. So I'm just doing the very tip. I didn't even have the V anymore. I'm just going to do the tip of it. There. See? Piece of cake. So now I have pretty much the fish done. I mean, that was pretty dang easy. Now I'm just going to pop in some bubbles. I can use that same eyeball circle and pop some big bubbles in there. And it doesn't have to be, anything perfect. Alright? Just here and there. And not very many of the big ones. I'm going to go small now. So I have a very smooth, small one. And I'm just going to put some more in there. There. That's a couple more down here. Alright, that's all it is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to recase the bottom here where the rainbow is. And then we're going to do him. Same thing, you could probably put some more lines in here with the spoon if you want. Notice that, it corrects for this mismanagement of the cut. But I'm not really too concerned with that because once it's done, you're not going to see a lot of that. This, you could model it, erase it out like that. Just rub your line if you want it a little smoother. You can mold it down a little more if you want. But I pretty much think that is a good barrier between the background color and the fish. So I'm just going to continue with this guy. And I'll give you a heads up in a minute. I have re-wet this surface, and I've avoided my texture on this side so that doesn't melt. If I was to wet this side, then all of these nice tight cuts would just melt and be mushy, spongy looking. So you have to be very careful, and that's the nice thing about these lines, because even if I wanted to do the fish and I wanted to redo these lines, I could just wet those lines and redo them. But avoid this area now. This area is done. Now I'm going to bevel this guy and finish him out. I know that now that you've seen how this is done, you can easily carve this fish. So I'm just going to carve it out and we'll show you what I do at the end. I've finished the two fish. And that's about all the carving I'm going to do. I will put one little fly in his mouth. I'll show you how to do that real quick. It's pretty easy. I'm not going to make it. He's a big fish, so this might be a third of his size. So, or even a quarter of his size. So I'm just going to do something small. We got tiny little midges, so it doesn't have to be anything, really. There. Maybe a little hint of another wing. Okay. That's all it needs to be. So, that pretty much concludes the carving of this piece. Now I'm going to show you how to finish the edges. Okay. Now I'm going to edge this. I want to show you the tools that I use. This is glycerin soap. It's a little sweaty today because it's very humid here in Oregon. This is P800, I believe it's called gator cloth, finishing cloth, final polishing. I use, this is a piece of canvas that I have put a lot of that glycerin soap in. And I use a sanding block and a edger, okay? I sharpen my edger on the corner of this. I mean, I know this is probably not the proper way, but you know what? It works. I haven't seen anybody else do it this way, but it works. So I'm going to do that. Make sure your hands are nice and clean. And then you'll run this edger along that seam and edge it out. Now after I get this sewn, I will also redo this just so that it's nice and smooth in one piece. But I like to do this first because you know, I have a flap and I have an edge up here that aren't going to be sewn to another piece, although I will have a lining on this. So I'll show you how to do that later after this dries. But as you can see, even though I had a scissor line on there, that pretty much help that out. And then I'll go with my light sandpaper on this too and make that nice and smooth. And I'm really kind of sanding the back, not what I just edged. That'd be kind of redundant. Kind of rounding it on both sides. It's a little rough, but like I said, after I sew it, then I'm going to redo this. And a lot of people put it on a belt sander and get it really super, 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 super nice. Anyway, so that, and then I will go around with the glycerin and try only to get on the edge. You don't want to put this on your paintable surface because then you sometimes the dyes don't adhere to really well. It looks really kind of yucky on the edge. So I said there's people, that a little bit. People do edging way better than me, but I get it done and it looks nice, so, you know, I'm more of an artist. I'm letting this, heating it up, and this is with the canvas that I'm using. Just to smooth it and keep going. Like I said, when I sew this, I'll even go tighter. And then you can also use this edge. I'm really happy with already. Nice and smooth. So, that's kind of my prep for my edges. And then what I will do is I will let this dry 24 hours because we're in the humidity. So I want it to dry all the way before I do any dyeing. And then tomorrow I will dye and paint this, and then we will construct it. I hope you enjoyed this portion of the iPad case. So I hope to see you next time. Have a great day.